Geometry, Unit 7, which is Chapter 5 from the book, Section 4, Properties of Midsegments. So the property of a midsegment of a triangle is a line that connects the midpoints of two sides. So here we know, since this is a midsegment connecting the midpoint, so it's cutting these segments in half. Now, if we want to start thinking about what this means in terms of what the length of the midsegment actually is, well, we can start thinking about this in terms of a small triangle and a large triangle. If this segment was x, the other segment would be x, and the full segment would be 2x. So if this is x, this is 2x. So if this was y, we can, using similar triangles, we can determine that this length would be 2y. So the midsegment of a triangle is half of the other side, the parallel side. So that was 10. The midsegment would be 5. Now, as we just stated, these are also parallel. Thus, we know those angles would be congruent because those are corresponding angles. All right, so let's look at this triangle here. We've got all of these midsegments. So we know these are congruent. We also know that these segments are congruent. And we also know that these segments are congruent. Now, since a midsegment is half of the full side, YZ is equal to half of CB. Now, half of CB, we can see x is the midpoint. So CX is half of the length of CB. So we can also make this conclusion that YZ is congruent to CX, which is also congruent to XB. We can do the same thing. AZ is congruent to YX. And then AY would be congruent to ZX. And so we have all of these different congruent sides going on here in a triangle with midsegments. So then let's actually now fill in some angles, and let's figure out all of the sides. So if this is 5, we know these are congruent, so that's 5. This is also 5, so the full length is 10. This is 6, so this is going to be 6. Also 6. Full length is 12. This one's 7, so that's 7. 7. Full length is 14. Now let's solve for some angles. This is 35, 95. So when we add this up, it's going to add up to 180. So angle B here, so 180 minus 95 minus 35, and we get this is 50 degrees. Now, we can use this idea and be like, oh, this is 50 degrees. Well, that means this angle is also 50 degrees. This angle's 95. This angle's 35. We already stated these angles were congruent. So that's 95. Because those are, we've got parallel lines here. Those are corresponding angles. This is 50 degrees, so this will be 50 degrees. 35 degrees, so we're going to have, this is 35 degrees as well. 50, we also got 50 here, and then this will also be 35. And then this one will be 95. So we have all of those sets of parallel lines with all these interior corresponding angles going on there. Now, properties of midsegment of a trapezoid is a line that connects the midpoints of the two legs. So remember, the legs are the non-parallel sides. So it's connecting the midpoints of the non-parallel sides. Now, the midsegment's length is half the length of the two bases. So if I take the base and add the other base, divide that by 2, that equals the length of the midsegment. So if AB was 10, DC was 20, 10 plus 20 divided by 2, so that's 30 divided by 2, it's 15. So EF would be 15. So let's look at this problem here. It gives us this idea of combining midsegments of triangles and midsegments of trapezoids. We're given the length of AC is 20, and we're told DE is the midsegment of the triangle ABC. DF is the midsegment of triangle ABC. And then GH is a midsegment of the trapezoid ADEC. So we've got a lot going on here. So those two sides will be congruent. Those two sides will be congruent. And then this length will be congruent to this length. This length congruent to this length. And then we've got also these two lengths will be congruent. So let's start there with that bottom. So if those two lengths are congruent, this will be 10, this will be 10. Now DE is the midsegment, so DE was the midsegment of the triangle. That is half of this side, so DE is going to be 10. Now if we look at what we also have here, we've got the trapezoid. GH is the midsegment of the trapezoid. So it's going to be the sum of the two sides divided by 2. So that's going to be 15. So GH, the length of GH is 15. Now we notice here we've got a triangle. GK is the midsegment of that. So GK is 5. Well, if the whole length of GH is 15 and GK is 5, KH is 10. And there we go. And that is the end of this section.